Hello, fans, and welcome. I'm a little uneasy right now. Things are a little unsettled here.
Yeesh! Yeesh!
Things are a little unsettled here in the Reflection Studio.
Have you read Constantine's Sword? It's about how Jesus Christ was anglicized by the Lutheran Protestants in 1560. Yeesh!
You're with me, fans. We're going to try to get through this as we're joined by the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan. Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Thanks for being here, Tony.
Can you please explain your attire? I mean, we didn't ask you to come in. I mean, are you feeling like...
It's cocktail hour, and usually, you know, when I'm at home, I look over my Dominion. I have a collection of gargoyles in my yard. I got them all together and said, what should I do different this week? They said, you're going to go see Tim and Rob. Why don't you wear a black robe? And I said, yeah, why not?
Well, at least we're not at the ocean. The purple haze isn't going to come through the doors.
Well, you may not be. You may be surprised. He's the only person I've ever known that's been barred from my house.
Can you tell that story? What
yeah,
happened?
he lives in the next island over. When he came over the last time, I was crippled for 4 days. So I said, you know, he's 82.
Yeah.
He squatted 405 for 5 sets of 15. So I don't want to mess with him.
Do you stay in communications with him?
Yes, I do. He spends half of his year in Singapore. He's married to a Singaporean princess. And then he spends the other time in the islands by
Right.
so once.
The relationship you formed with him that goes all the way back to Florida, I thought we could start out there.
Yeah.
Start out in Florida. You're very recognized for the Florida days. Would you call that the highlight of your in-ring career?
Certainly that was most notoriety, but the other thing was, Mark and I go back further to the Georgia TBS.
Right.
When it was me and Austin Idol against Abdullah and Mark Lewin. And the thing was, I was a babyface, Idol was a heel. It was a great angle they did. When Idol became a babyface, all the babyfaces accepted him, but I wouldn't accept him.
Right.
So they did this angle where he was wrestling Mark, and they sent me out to the hot dog stand, a Coke stand, or concession stand, if you will, to get a soda, and Abdullah hit the ring. And he jumped on Idol, and the people literally pushed me to the ring, so I had to make a comeback. So we make a comeback together, and Marky and Abdullah leave, and then it's me and Idol in the ring. He puts out his hand, I refuse to shake it. And then we're forced to wrestle Mark and Abdullah.
Right.
Because Georgia Championship Wrestling has booked the match. And some of the best interviews I have ever had were anti-interviews, because I used to say, Idol, I can't stand myself, and you're the person that's made me do this. Because every time I go look in the mirror, I realize I'll do anything for money if I'm your partner. and it was my first chance to actually work with Abdullah and Maki on a continuous basis and be on their level. I had worked with them before, putting them over, but it was the first time I got to work with them on their level. So it was a whole brand new experience. And I know you can ask Terry Funk, you can ask Mick Foley. When you work with Abdullah and Terry Funk and Mark Lewin, it's a whole different experience. It's real. It's real. I saw Marky do some shit that I'd said to myself, we used to go into Texas from Florida. And Gary Hart was our manager. And Fritz got Mark in the claw, me in the claw, and Gary's on the outside. He's giving Gary the Iggy, right?
Right.
And Mark says, what do you want to do, put the claw around with your foot? But when he wanted to get the big Fritz down, he'd take his knees out from under him, and it wasn't a work. I mean, Fritz's knees were bad from football and wrestling. Mark and Abdullah and Terry Funk were a different animal to work with.
Interesting. When you were developing this persona and this character, were you apprehensive? Because I mean, it's not those days were the fans were not as smart to the business.
Yeah. And I went from to do this character, I went from point A. I didn't start at S. If I started at S, it never would have got over. And I was lucky enough I had the greatest baby faces of all time to work with. I was working with Dusty, Blackjack, Barry, Superstar Billy Graham, and Andre the Giant. And these giants were putting me over.
Who was the easiest to get heat on out of those guys?
Dusty.
Yeah.
I mean, he owned the world. I mean,
Right.
he was when he and there was some subliminal things done to me. When suppose the ultimate evil would chop him, right, and he'd be bleeding, he would go back and do this. I mean, that's subliminal as shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And here's, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I don't have to go any further with it. He was a smart guy, but he learned that from Mark when Mark was a babyface. We all stole from Mark. We all stole from Abdullah, the original Sheik, and Dusty would tell you that too. The dead man's walk where Dusty used to do with the flip-flop and then walk off the stage, that was Mark as a babyface. I mean...
Do you think he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves in looking back in the annals of the history of big men and wrestlers? Do you think he is overlooked?
Mark?
Yeah, Mark.
Oh, by far. I mean, Vince Sr. said he was the greatest babyface he ever had.
Wow.
In 1953, think about this. Mickey Mantle made, I believe, $13,000 or $17,000. Mark at 16 made 123. That's 53. You know what I mean?
That's money.
Yeah, that's some serious money. And Mark got into his characters. He was the first one. When he became the Purple Haze and I conjured him up from the sea, you know, the character was at home when I got in the car, but it wasn't all the time. Marky and I, when I got hooked up with Mark, we took our robes everywhere, shopping, gym, car, lights on.
You worked out in the robes?
We took the robes off, but I mean, we wore the robes and shorts and nothing else.
Now, was that him? Because you said in a previous interview that you did with us that he kind of convinced you to live the gimmick.
Yeah, he convinced me to live my gimmick because he said, one of the things that made it work too was one of the biggest jokes I ever pulled, ribs I ever pulled was I was working for ECW and Taz and I had been tag team partners, champions. And when we split, we had this little feud. So I came out and got on the mic and said, there's nobody coming out. There's no Tasmaniac coming out because he doesn't know where Tasmania is. And he came out, he was so pissed, he suplexed me. I think he shit his pants or came in his pants, one of the two. But I had spent time in Singapore. So I could say to somebody out there, maybe there's only 2 people in Florida that went to Singapore, but I could say to them, I was at Boogie Streets at Fatty's and Skinny served me. And those 2 people would say, this guy's legit, you know?
Right.
He knows what he's talking about. And then I've been to the cave temples in Ipoh, Malaysia. In Ipoh, Malaysia, there's a Mercedes-Benz emblem on the top of the mountain.
Wow.
More Mercedes per capita are sold in Ipoh, Malaysia than any place else in the world. 3/4 of all the tin in the world is mined in Ipoh, Malaysia. So I spent a year traveling through those places, and I picked up...
What made you go there? Are you
Mark was running the territory, so I worked Samoa, New Zealand, Malaysia, Jakarta, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tasmania. But I was there for a year.
Wow, that must have... did you grow as a performer?
Yeah, and I had a great time. It was like... You got to realize this is over 30 years ago. It was like, wow.
What were the fans like there as compared to American fans?
Wow, I'll tell you a funny story. Mark was a god there. And we went to Ipoh, Malaysia. When we went to Ipoh, Malaysia, there was a guy that put on the wrestling show, and we went to his office, and his journey was in the wall on 2 feet by 2 feet plates of gold from the time of his childhood until he became successful. So over there you had to wrestle a lot. You know, you couldn't do what we did, right? So me, not being too bright a kid, I guess, I kept on punching Mark, and then I took him over and I kicked him. When I kicked him, they all came to the arena, or most of them came to the arena, and scooters. They started throwing the helmets at me, and I'm ducking at the helmets. And then all of a sudden I went back and got a helmet and hit Mark. They came over the walls.
Oh.
And Mark went out and did this. And the whole crowd stopped. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I got out of there and I said, I'm never going to wrestle you again here in this part of the world. He was literally a guy. And the crazy thing was King Curtis was the same way. I mean, the people really took to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have to convince him to do the Purple Haze, or from the very beginning he was into it?
Yeah, and what got the Purple Haze over, this is my opinion, was the original. That was one of the first wrestling videos ever when I conjured him from the sea.
Right.
But everybody forgets who narrates it. The greatest orator of all times.
Yes.
So we had that going for us. It was February, and Marky was coming out of the water.
Right.
It was a one-take deal, and we had a full moon.
Yes.
We couldn't have planned it. And the girl that was doing the video with me was a MTV video girl. So, I mean, we had everything. We had the Beauty, we had the Beast, we had Curtis, we had a full moon. You know, I mean, you couldn't have lost.
You made a statement that I found interesting when you were comparing Florida wrestling, and you said that Florida was ECW before ECW even existed.
Absolutely. I broke Paulie in the business.
Right.
I tried to run him out of the business with Scott Hall. Every night I said he had his own wrestler, Tombstone, and on the back of the guy's back was Scott Hall, his birthday, and death with a question mark. And I said to Scott every night, drill him, please. I got to get rid of this guy.
Right.
And Paul would take this lick from Scott, and I said, oh, he killed him. And he'd dust himself off and get up. And he did it about 4 times. When I came to Scott the 5th time, I said, ain't gonna work. I don't know if he's got a secret gefilte fish in his pocket or some kind of blessing.
Right.
Leave him alone, he's gonna make it. And I gave him the phone. And I mean, Paul just learned what Florida wrestling was. People always think Florida wrestling was wrestling. It was wrestling underneath to after the special attraction, then the semi-main and main event were gory. Paul took a lot of guys like 911 that couldn't have gotten over, couldn't tie their shoes, and he gave them the chokeslam. I stole that back from Paul with the Giant originally.
Right.
Paul learned so much in Florida. He was around Dusty, he was around Eddie for a while, he was around Mike, and he saw what drew money, and he took that idea of violence, but here's how he did the Florida angle. At the end, he had Shane Douglas a wrestler,
Yes.
and Taz a wrestler. So he just blueprinted Florida Championship Wrestling and did it better because we couldn't afford the luxury of guys not being able to work, but because Eddie was so staunch, you know what I mean?
Right.
There was no local guys in the business. And I mean, they broke Hogan's leg.
Yeah.
So he saw, I'm on a shoestring budget, I can pay these guys here, but these guys here, I got to create. Like New Jack and the guy he wrestled when they fell off the... I'm sure Paul didn't go, oh my God, I hope they're not hurt. I'm sure he said, hey, Robbie, you got the camera close on that one where Jack's braids are coming out of his nose?
Right.
It was a whole different thing. And the concept was, here's the thing. I love Paulie, and I actually believe that if he stayed, we'll say, from Massachusetts to Baltimore, across to Cleveland, in that area, he'd still be in business today.
Do you think maybe he had the wrestling mind but not the business mind?
Well, he owes a lot of people a lot of money. He owes me $6,000, by the way, Paul.
The mentality that he sold to his locker room was it was us against the world. Did Florida feel that way too, or was it completely different?
We knew we were the shit in Florida. But here's the thing. Paulie must have watched a lot of the Newt Rockne story, you know, the great coach from Notre Dame. Terry Funk and I used to look at each other while Paul gave that, and Terry and I would roll our eyes. We'd go, wow. I mean, yeah, Paul's family must have come from Russia when the revolution was going on.
Right.
They must have been good friends of Lenin,
right,
because he sold them a lot of propaganda bullshit, and they took a hook, line, and sinker, and rightfully so, because he made those guys perform much better than they were.
Right. That's interesting. So you and Funk would hear this, and you would just look at each other and laugh.
Yeah, we look at each other and go. Well, we're always across the room from one another because we didn't want to laugh. And Paulie would catch us sometimes when he was giving the speech, and he'd look at me and Funk and like give us the Magoo, like, you know, I know.
So he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. He was very good at it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So going back, so when you guys were in Florida, do you feel was it the locker room feeling that this could go bigger, like ECW like had those dreams or whatever, WCW? Did you feel like you could go and expand out of your territory
In Florida?
Yeah. Or were you guys happy being where you were?
Eddie had, you got to remember, time was different.
Yeah.
And the reason why Eddie took Florida as his territory, he only had one border to protect. That was the north. Eddie came to me when TBS first became cable. And you got to remember, when cable first came on, a lot of people didn't get cable, especially in the cities.
Right.
It was the rural people that got it. And he said to me, he said, this is the end of pro wrestling as we know it. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, I went through this in the 50s when the national TV was out of Chicago. And people don't realize this, there was 2 national TVs out of Chicago, Leonard Schwartz and Kohler. They both had national TVs, and they were both NWA members. Then there was wrestling from Hollywood, and then there was wrestling from Texas, and then there was Bridgeport Wrestling. But I told Rob this the other day. When these historians tell you, well, this is what happened, I was there.
Right.
If I wasn't there, I asked, okay? And this is what's going on with the WWE right now. Jim Barnett told me that when the cable wrestling died, they had seen Kowalski against Yukon 27 times on TV plus and 50 times in the arena.
Right.
He said in the 60s they didn't make a star. That's why he sold everything in the United States and went to a virgin territory, Australia, and started anew. It's almost like I said this, and these guys are fabulous performers. Remember Cena Orton? You couldn't get away from that match?
Yes.
I mean, how many times can the guys wrestle one another? And that's what's happening is their longevity has gotten longer, and they don't know how to replace a star. It's like they're going back and getting, you know, Rock and Ronda Rousey a couple of times. They've gotten Mick Foley come back, Ric Flair to come back. Brother, my favorite baseball player of all times is Big Papi, the designated hitter for the Red Sox. He can't come back, okay? He's not going to be able to hit the fastball. If he did, I would think, well, this isn't work, and I'm glad to see him, but he probably couldn't even hit it over the fence. He'd pop it up, right? When the guys come back and do this, they're taking from the young guys, not on purpose. It's the company saying, we need you to draw. Now, I don't watch the product that often, but I saw the pay-per-view, okay? These are the matches I saw. I saw the girls' match.
Right.
I saw Finn Balor's match. I saw the blonde Italian kid, Lorenzo.
Oh, Enzo.
Enzo, and I saw the main event, 5 against 3.
Right.
Okay, let me go. What I saw. I saw 2 girls that looked so far apart from Ronda Rousey. Remember Ronda Rousey
Sure.
when she was the hottest thing in the world? When she got down that crouch, she was the ugliest woman I've ever seen. She looked like a red-ass baboon in heat.
Right.
These girls got ready to go on the pole, okay? Then we got Finn Balor against
AJ Styles.
AJ Styles. 2 great performers. And when they ended, they go like this.
Yeah.
You know what they told me? They said there's not a 6'10" guy in there and a guy that looks like Tarzan. There's 2 midgets in that ring.
Interesting.
Okay? Now they got Enzo, who I happen to really get off to. That was the first time I ever watched him. He's like Lauren Bacall. He's got a whiskey voice and he smokes a lot of cigarettes. I'll kill you. I love him. I love him.
I'm a fan.
Okay? But is he going to be the 116-time cruiserweight champion of the world? The kid had it for 6 days. And you put a guy with a mask on that's trying to be Rey Mysterio. Sorry, there's only one Rey Mysterio. Go back to the dressing room and figure this one out. Now, we decide what we're going to do with the savior of the company, Braun Strowman, right? Eddie Graham was spinning in his grave. 5 on 3, it becomes 5 on 2. Correct? Mm-hmm. They throw the 2 weak baby faces of the garbage truck, but they power out of there. Correct?
Right.
Beat up everybody. Now the monster, you know, who throws the little girl in the lake and kills the monk and all that, Frankenstein, gets choke slammed. They pull a string, and we don't see the chairs hit him. So I know that some people are doing this, right? And everybody in the arena is seeing them do this.
Right.
And then we threw him in a garbage truck with the compactor squished them. So he's a fucking piece of garbage. You think Eddie Graham would have got Jack Briscoe over that? You think Dory Funk Sr. would have got Terry over that? You think Paul Heyman would have got Shane Douglas over? They are so far fucked. And it ended up 5 against 2. And here's the greatest thing. Angle is a huge star. His return should have been built up like the Gone with the Wind. Oh, we're throwing Angle in there. He's not ready to compete, so he has to take a break during the match. What? Let's fuck. Kevin, could you write this down and really fuck this up? Okay, let me do this. Well, we're going to throw the biggest star that we have in a garbage truck. We're going to compact it. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. It's going to be tremendous. And then we're going to Kurt Angle. We're not going to build him up at all. And then we'll give him a break. And he'll beat 5 heels up. And then, what the fuck are they doing?
And they wonder why there's a disconnect. with
Oh,
fans.
my God. Oh, my God. I mean, this is so fucking far removed from getting guys on. Let me tell you about Eddie Graham. And Robbie knows that. I was in a bad position at one time. Mike and Eddie were fighting. I was Mike's partner, his dearest friend, and then I became the surrogate son because I was the go-between trying to patch the shit up.
Right.
And I asked Eddie, he's getting ready to put the belt on Jack. I said, how? He fired a booker because he got juice on Jack. Fired a booker. Guy came in, said, what did you do last night? He said, well, we got a little juice on Jack with Terry Funk. He said, you're fired, out of here.
Wow.
Okay? And I said, why did you fire him? He said, Jack's the racehorse that's going to win the Kentucky Derby. He said, we're going to walk him, we're going to run him, we're going to feed him, we're going to brush him down, we're going to put blankets over him, we're going to have guards there so the wolves don't get in the corral. We're going to make Jack. Oh, Ram, they did make it, by the way, my friend.
Do you think the WWE's mentality is they know fans are going to be there regardless because they're the only game in town? So
yes, absolutely.
They can just throw whatever they want.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm at a point now, I think they absolutely hate wrestling. I heard the statements said that when they did 105,000 people in Dallas, somebody said in the office, I wish we could have done it without a ring.
Whew.
They don't call it wrestling, superstars. You can't use the word belt. Strap, all this stuff. That tells me somebody in their writing history. Robbie, do you ever listen to my bullshit on MSL?
On the podcast?
Yeah.
Honestly, I haven't. No disrespect.
But I always talk about the burning of the library in Alexandria, okay? When the Romans came, they burnt the library in Alexandria, okay? Mm-hmm. The burning of the library in Alexandria killed our history. This week they found a parchment, and now they got these special things. You know how the pyramid is? They found a special room up there that they never knew was there.
The Great Pyramid?
Yeah,
I just
Giza.
read this on CNN today.
Okay, on Giza. They found the special room. There may be some shit in there. But in the library they burnt down and told about that room because they found these scraps of paper. Well, that's what you're going to be doing 10 years from now. You're going to be finding a piece of paper and saying, this is what wrestling used to be. And they're going to take everything off the air. They're going to take YouTube. They're going to, you won't be able to see Buddy Rogers. You'll just see this, and you'll say, because it isn't the fans' fault. If I'm fed horseshit, after a while, I like horseshit because I don't know any better.
Right.
If I had guys said to me, oh, that was a great way to get them over. Well, two guys talking to me were independent promoters who don't know dick. And if they think that's propaganda, that's how they're propaganda in wrestling. They're sending a message out. There's no history. The library's burnt down. Forget about it. Don't listen to anybody. Well, they're superstars. It's not even wrestling. And I know I must have tremendous heat with this guy, and I don't even know him, Samoa Joe. After his match with Brock, either A, he was embarrassed that he didn't get enough, or B, he wanted to cover his ass. He said, Brock doesn't like to talk over his matches. Right after his match. Now, the only thing they got going for him, we believe that Brock's the baddest guy on the planet, right? He's tough, but I like to give Ming about 4 shots of Jack Daniels and say, go get it, brother, and shut the room.
Speaking of Ming, I'm interviewing Ming later tonight.
Wow.
His first interview of this kind ever done before.
Will you do me a favor?
Yes.
Will you bring this story up?
I would love to.
I've been there when these goozle guys bit their noses off, the whole thing, ears, beat them up. One time, I ran a charity show and he was nice enough to come, and they had a bar there. And this girl came by, and she pulled her skirt up in front of him, and he spanked her on the ass, and he's got hands like cement blocks.
Right.
She started crying, and my better half kicked the girl in the ass and pushed her away from Ming because her ass was in his face. And Ming was tilted back on the seat with his feet up on the table, and she shoved him, and he fell over, and he was going, oh, and I straddled him, and I said, 30 years reputation just went down the shit tube. He looked at me and said, I put her over, brother, but not you. I said, can I get you up, sir? Hey, get him another drink. All the stories, you saw Rock on Conan talk about him.
Yes.
It's legit.
Toughest guy. So Brock Lesnar versus Ming in a bar fight.
About 33 seconds. That's what Ming put in the Jack Daniels down.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is no disrespect to Brock because I think he's the greatest athlete and the greatest thing we've ever had in the wrestling business for 50 years.
Because he's believable.
Yes.
Right. And that's so hard
And he
to
doesn't
obtain.
wear a T-shirt. Can you name, you're a wrestling aficionado. Name me one guy beside Cactus Jack that ever drew money with a T-shirt on.
Nobody I can think of.
Well, wait a minute. I see them every Monday and Tuesday. They all get T-shirts on.
They do.
Are they drawing money?
I think the WWE logo draws money.
That's exactly what it is. They're never going to let anybody over like Hogan got over and held them up. like Wari got over, held him up, Sid got
So
over.
you think that's a part of it?
Absolutely.
They never want to give the power to the performer.
Absolutely.
Does that take a lot of the?
Well, let me ask you this: when you have a Nazi Schwarzenegger, Adolf runs the company, right?
Right.
So he ain't gonna let anybody.
Goebbels isn't getting.
No, he ain't
right.
getting shit.
Right.
Goebbels,
Right.
Goering, Himmler, they're not getting shit. It's Adolf.
Right. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Do you think? With Vince McMahon, he has a lineage in the business. He has a history. He has a mind. He's a smart guy. Is he for this? You think, or is he like just going with the flow at this stage of his career?
I think that he is doing. Let me say this about him too. I've been in the wrestling business a long time. Did I ever think that someday the President of the United States would be in the Wrestling Hall of Fame and his wife would be the head cabinet member for Small Business Administration? My hats are off to them. They're the Kennedys. They're the new Kennedys, okay? I think what he's doing is he doesn't know what to do, really, because he's from my era. He's a little older than me, but he's from my era. He's not. I've been able to, even though I fought for a long time, to get on social media, okay? And I understand the power of it. It's like Billy Graham pulled a hell of a rib on me just recently. But like Billy said, anything you want to do, as long as people see a name, they think it's true, okay? I think he's trying to hold on to that company because in 15 years, he'll be 87 years old. Certainly, he's not going to be running the company, right? I think he's trying to leave it in the best shape he possibly can for his children and his grandchildren. Whether it does last, we're going to have to see. I won't see it. You'll see it.
Do you ever see any company ever again rising from the ashes to give any kind of legitimate competition?
I do. I'll tell you why. I never thought I would. I work for a company in L.A., and it's called PCW. And the kid there, his name is Joe Cabibbo. He wrestles as Almighty Sheik. He wrestles as Joseph now. He's got it. He's got the old and the new, okay? He's got Pentagon on the card. He's got RVD on the card. He's got Johnny Morrison on the card. He's got bunch of young Spanish guys. You got Sammy Callahan on the card. We had, I'm involved in his faction, and we're stone cold baby faces because we're stone cold heels, right?
Right.
And Terry Funk was there to meet and greet, and he's saying, as only Terry can say, well, I'm so glad to be here. You people are so wonderful, and I just glad to be here. And I walked out, and now I'm stone cold babyface. I'm just signing autographs for the people to meet and greet. And I snatched the microphone from him, and I said, I've been waiting 30 years to ask you, who the fuck do you think you are? I had a hard time getting out of the ring.
Right.
Because he's the most lovable person we have, okay? He's going to wrestle in a 6-man tag match, and it's going to be Terry, Muta, and Pentagon against Joey and Fatu and another guy. Out of that, they'll have 3 former NWA champions. And I'm saying, well, maybe he didn't even know what he was doing, but he sort of cock-blocked Billy Corrigan from the NWA right there, didn't he?
Right.
I mean, the two were legit, and Joey was legit too, but he was the last of the legit. So if somebody would say, we can't go back, okay? You know, and I agree with what we talked about Cornette earlier. This is what I do believe Jimmy's right. You can't put the toothpaste back into the thing. But for a moment, you can make them question. Brian Pillman was a perfect example with me. You know what I mean?
We're going to get into that. So the initial question was, can a company rise from the ashes? So let's take that theory of a company rising from the ashes and go back in time, because a company did rise to compete at one time, and you were an integral part of that. Right. Let's go back to the WCW days, pre the launching of Nitro. leaning into them competing Monday nights.
Right.
So you're there. What's your position at that moment when they're planning on going to compete Monday
Well,
night?
I was the booker. Hogan came to me and said, "Can you make this work?" I said, "Yeah, I can take you to the promised land." What everybody forgets is I beat them on the first quarter hour.
Right.
You know why?
This was the first Monday head-to-head?
Yeah, and they had said they won't be in business in 6 weeks. I beat them the first quarter hour. You know why?
Why?
I was paying attention to the internet then. The darling of the internet was Juice and Thunder Lager. I bought him with Brian Pillman. What are you going to watch, a squash match at WWE? You're going to watch Juice and Thunder Lager, who you've never seen, but you heard so much about on the internet.
Right.
I realized there was something out there. You know, you either evolve or you die. And when I get on the podcast, MSL and Sullivan, I always say, Em, did you read a book this month? If you don't read history, if you don't follow what's going on in the world today, you get locked in. It's like I've been reading this book on the brain about subconscious and conscious. If your subconscious keeps playing a theory over, it becomes true. Even if, we'll say you have a dream that you're a kid on the beach.
Transdimensional repetition.
You got it, okay? It's happened to me. I have one. I got almost total recall. I can remember being 9 months old in the crib, but I got one that I'm not sure if it's true or not. Okay. They have gone so far that they have, I know if somebody's doing this for Vince, the social media, he ain't doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
The scariest thing I ever heard, when when Scott did the Razor Ramon gimmick for them, they hadn't seen the movie. They didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. You got to stay ahead of, what is the culture of the world. I mean, you got to look at TV, you got to look at Netflix, you got to look at Twitter, you got to look at everything, because that's what it is. What we once knew is gone. Today it hit me. I was flew for Rob, as you know. I'm looking at the counter. Remember you see girls at the counter?
Yeah.
I fuck with them all the time. I go over and say, I can't see, my eyes bad. I make them work, Oh, can you? Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, I got it in my pocket, right? I don't have my Advantage number. Can you find that for me?
Right.
And when I get through with them, I said, you know what I just did? I might have saved your job for another 6 months, because you're going to be replaced by a machine. We don't see that, because in our minds, when I get up in the morning and I was going to say comb my hair, when I wash my head, I look at myself, I say, who the hell is that? And in my subconscious, it's from the time I had the best time in my life, the best era in my life. I see that.
When was it? The best era?
I think it was when my mid-30s, early 40s. And because I got a little bit smarter about the life, and I went away from the world, really, from following sports and baseball and politics and reading, into being really wrapped up into the character. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, I got to do something else. But I think what's happened to these people is they live in such a fishbowl existence. And I've been there too. They got to write 3 hours for Monday. They got to write 2 hours for Tuesday. Then they have a couple other shows, 205, blah, blah. How do they have time for anything to sip in? And usually, here's the thing that I can't understand. Wrestling copies everything, right? After World War II, Nazis and Germans, right? Cold War, Nikita Koloff, Iron Sheik. Then before that, the guy that turned Dusty Babyface was Pak Song Nam, a Vietnamese guy,
Yes.
right? They're pushing the girls. How come none of them beat somebody in 14 seconds with an armbar or a leg hold? They can't be looking at anything else but this with blinders on saying, okay, we got to get this done. The TV, what do you think about this? Oh, fuck, we got to go. We got a production meeting in 2 minutes. Oh, it's okay. Nobody is quality control. You know, like years ago when Ford had something built, they'd have a guy looking at all the bumpers. Every 10th bumper was bad, take it out. Windshield, every 20th windshield, take it out. They don't have anybody saying, and I guarantee you this, they don't have anybody telling Vince, I think you made a mistake here.
Right.
I kept Humperdinck around for years as my assistant. Wasn't really my assistant, but he got paid when he showed up. And it's just when I did TVs, I turned the TVs over to him and I said, what do you think? He said, well, they're great, except, can I ask you about segment 3? I said, yeah. He said, segment 3 is because you want everybody to know you read Hamlet and Ophidius Complex. Is that why we're doing this? Or you want to draw some money? I said, is that obvious? He said, if it's obvious to me who doesn't read Shakespeare, it's pretty fucking crazy. So I changed it. I think Vince could do, one time John Lennon said he could do an album called Shit and just say shit, shit, shit. People will say, do you know what he's trying to say? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think that they're falling into the guys that used to question Vince are going, whoa, I don't want to question him. They're very weak right now.
I'll play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
What if somebody from the company says the business is so overexposed, the fans are not the same kind of fans, they don't believe anything, we'll just serve anything up on a platter and just feed it to them because the wrestling business isn't what it used to be.
I agree with that people are smart, but I also think, like I said, this PCW, I signed autographs and I'm babyface. I tell Terry Funk, who the fuck do you think you are? And they closed in on me. And I left my partners there saying, hey, see you later. I've seen this episode of Leave It to Beaver before, 37 times.
Right.
Get my ass out of here. You're interviewing Ming. You know why you're interviewing Ming?
Because you're a legend.
He's a legend. No, not me, Ming. Because he's the toughest son of a bitch that walked the face of the earth. And he's more over now than... Robbie, don't you think he's more over now than he was working?
100%. He's got the aura around him.
Yeah, I mean, and he looks like Ming still. I mean, if you punch him in the face, he'd eat your hand.
I don't think I'll be punching him in the face.
I know, but I agree with you. They said, oh, well, we can give him all the shit. Nah, I think it's going to be a point where... This is why you're seeing... I was in an independent show in Charlottesville, Virginia, right, where the bullshit happened.
Right.
They drew 1,700 people with nobody on the card. We were there to sign autographs, and it ended up me and Steamboat hooking up in the main event. But they didn't advertise that. It was just trying to pass on something for the kids. Joey's last show was 96 grand. When he has Muda, they're going to do 125 grand.
Right.
There's an underground swell of, it's almost to me, I'm a music buff too. Husker Du, Bob Mole, and Nirvana. Mm-hmm. If you had told anybody during the time that rock and roll was hot, this was going to replace them, they'd say, are you shit me? These kids with flannel shirts jumping in the mosh pits.
Right. You mean from the 80s? Well,
yeah. You say, that's bullshit. That ain't going to happen. It did. You know what I mean? The people are fed up. They want to go and see something like a movie. They want to not be insulted. And they want to say, wow, those guys were wonderful. And what a performance they had. And they're going to say one thing. This Fatu looks like Ming as a young boy.
Right.
They're going to say, that Fatu would kill you.
Yeah. You almost need like a punk rock underbelly swell.
I happen to become very good friends with Alicia, who runs Heavy Wrestling. Mm-hmm. She's the drummer for Kelly Osbourne. She's drums for Ozzy in the office, not in the office, in the studios. Her and I have become friends, and she's a very smart girl. If you want to look it up on YouTube, it's Heavy Wrestling. And now this is a girl that's hooked up with big music stars. And she said, it's the same thing as our business. She said, they think Ozzy's crazy. He's not crazy. He acts crazy in front of the camera, acts like he's fucked up all the time. He ain't fucked up all the time. You can't be a businessman and be fucked up all the time.
Right.
She said, but they believe in his persona. She said, now it's the grandkids that come and believe in his persona. She said, that's what wrestling needs, is one person for them to believe in. And I'll tell you what, the last time I saw them do anything good, when Goldberg and Brock did it, and people said, sorry, what?
They gave you something.
Oh,
there.
he said, when Brock and Goldberg did it, Robbie,
Right?
remember the first match?
Yeah.
Minute 14? Everybody bitched about it. It was the right thing to do. You know why? He was 52 years old. He'd been out of the wrestling business for 12 years. Where do you want to go, 20 minutes?
Right.
Come on, let's draw some money. The mentality is, here's the thing that Eddie Graham used to say to me. We had a match one night in Tampa. It didn't matter who was booking, okay? Whether it was Dusty, me, Lou Tillett, Leo Garibaldi, Bobby Shane. Tuesday, it's Eddie booked, okay? He'd give you a 5-minute finish. I remember one time he gave me a 5-minute finish, and I felt good, right? And ba. And I said, what do you think, boss? He said, where was the third drop kick? Now, guys weren't talking to one another up in the Tampa dressing room because, I got a hip toss, a very small package, oh, kick out, oh, Jesus, should I ask him? Oh, God, no, okay? And Eddie had Old Man Funk, who Eddie copied everything from. You've heard Terry say that.
Yes.
The old man watched my match and he said to me, kid, I like what you did. He said, don't ever stop making it look like a contest, because when I was a babyface, I used to put some amateur wrestling moves in there. So I watch it when Eddie's had Billy Robinson, who's a shoot legend, and Tony Charles, another shoot legend. They had a tremendous pro wrestling match on the third match. And I said, Eddie, what a great fucking match, huh, Eddie? He said, yeah, too bad I wouldn't draw a dime on top. You know what I'm saying? You have to have that kind of, that's what Paul Lee did too. He had solid shit, and then he had the violence, and then he ended up with wrestling. And Paul Lee had the formula. They've lost the formula completely. And I watched a little bit of Monday night, and the Japanese boy, Nakamura against Kevin, it was okay. But it was, I mean, maybe I didn't watch it long enough. But it wasn't nothing, it was no Steamboat Flair, you know what I mean? It wasn't Briscoe Funk. It wasn't Terry Funk and Abdullah the Butcher. It was good. But has taste buds fallen that bad that we're drinking Miller Lite now and thinking it's a good imported beer?
Right. But let's talk about Eric Bischoff a little bit, because he had it all in his hands.
Right.
He had the potential to still be relevant today.
Right.
And so talk about a little bit about him rising to power and your relationship with him.
I had a great relationship with Eric. He actually brought me in, and he was the one that said, can you do this? Put me in booking. But what happened to Eric, I believe, he was the right man for the right time for that job, but the two greatest politicians got on him. You think Hogan's good? Nash is the general, brother. He's the 5-star general. We've only had one in this country, Pershing. Okay, he's the 5-star general. And when they power bombed him in Baltimore as the face of WCW, and he came back as a character in the NWO,
That was the beginning of the end.
that was the beginning of the end.
Did his demeanor backstage change when he became a performer? Was he believing him?
Of course, all performers do, except a few. I mean, here's the thing. Every fan bitches about Dusty putting the world belt on him, right? They bitch about Hogan putting the world belt on himself. I don't hear anybody bitching about Vince Russo putting the belt on himself, or an actor.
They bitched about that, though.
You think they bitched about that like Dusty?
Well, a lot. I'm just speaking
Okay,
about,
go ahead.
They couldn't stand that, and that's one of the things that a lot of the fans trashed him for Russo for David Arquette getting the belt.
What about him getting the belt?
Yeah, I mean both. They're like killed the credibility of the
Yeah,
title.
and here's what they killed the credibility of the title was. I actually think that was going to be a pilot for a comedy show called Soap Opera. When you switch the belt 6 times in one night, the belt means shit.
Right. Well, there was also a movie out at that time that they were promoting.
Right, and they were going towards that way. But when Kevin and Scott and Hogan got Eric under their spell, hey, I've been under it too. It's very hard to get away from that. I mean, they make you feel good about yourself. You're the smartest guy in the room after you've talked to them and they've given you the direction. And hey, and they did the right thing because and they were the ones that complained to me. I don't know if they complained to Eric, but they did complain to me is when they said, he can't just think he can throw a T-shirt on these guys and get them over. My whole idea was there'd never be more than Kevin, Scott, Hulk, and 6. I mean, that's a gang. It ain't everybody else is a gang, Brutus. I mean, there was Virgil. There was,
Scott Norton. There was a million of them.
Yeah, it was
What was your relationship like with Hulk before the turn?
He stayed at my house the night before he turned.
I was going to get to that. So there's Eric Bischoff tells the story about him and Ric Flair going onto the set of Thunder in Paradise to try to convince Hulk to turn. Is that true?
No, they got him to come.
That was to get him to come.
Yeah, they got him to come. You were drinking with Mean Gene?
Yes, I was.
One of the greatest announcers of all times. He saved Hogan. This is what finally convinced Hogan. I've been talking to him. You got to turn. You got to turn. You got to turn. In Chicago, Hulk came out all in black bandana, and a black crucifix to sell his movie. When he walked out, the whole building booed him.
Yes.
But Mean Gene, as smart as Mean Gene is, he said, "You can hear the somber mood here tonight. They're very mad at the NWO." He saved it. Okay.
Right.
And he came to me, Mean Gene, afterwards and said, "You're absolutely right." He said, "I didn't think you were, but you got to turn this guy." And I was on him and on him and on him, and everybody, no.
So he was resisting.
Oh God!
What were the conversation? What was a typical conversation like between you and him when you were trying to convince him?
Well, you got to turn, and he's saying, "I'm going to lose all this merchandise and all this." I said, "Well, the NWO merchandise is the hardest to sell merchandise."
Right.
And then friends of his that were hangers-on, "Oh, don't turn. He wants to kill you. He wants to kill you." Why would I want to kill the guy?
They were saying that you wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
What would your motivation be behind doing
and that would hurt my position. But I'm going to tell you what saved Hogan. That Nash and Hall were such great businessmen. Because, Robbie, you remember the first interviews they did together with the black and white interviews?
Yes.
They could have buried him, could have killed him. They step and watch, okay? They actually step back. He's in front. Nash doesn't tower over him because Nash takes 2 steps back. Scott takes 2 steps back. They let him in front where he kicks the world. They handed it to him. If they wanted to, they could have killed him. But they realized he was Hulk Hogan. And that they also realized, think about this, there's never been a bigger turn to this day. That was the biggest turn in the history of wrestling.
I totally agree. One of the top 3 most memorable moments in the history of pro wrestling.
Right, and Nash and Hall swallowed their ego. I mean,
temporarily.
Swallow their ego to Hogan.
Right.
I mean, Nash one time told me if I booked the match, him and Hogan, when Hogan was a babyface in the cage, I thought about it, he was going to beat him up and strip him naked on live TV. Said, I can't have that happen, you know what I mean?
What was it
we
like?
didn't want to see anybody's shortcomings.
What are you trying to say, Kevin? So, I mean, describe what it's like at this moment. Now, you have this NWO faction growing, and you have 3 of the biggest, probably the biggest egos in the company all together,
Yeah.
and it's your job to deal with them.
I had a very good relationship with 2 out of the 3.
Who didn't you have one?
Hogan, he was very difficult, okay? Scott used to come to me when he was a kid and ask me to break him in the business. I gave him a break in Florida. He's one of the greatest workers of all times. Then Kevin and I, Dusty tried to kill Kevin and me when he put Kevin in his Oz, and when I killed the monkey, when we were walking down the thing. Kevin and I have always been close. We had a little, whatever, pissing contest, whatever. But Kevin's a very, very smart guy. I like hanging out with Kevin. He used to come to my house a couple of times a year for a weekend when we were down the Keys. Kevin can talk about wine. He can talk about painting. He can talk about everything besides wrestling. Kevin's a very smart guy. And back then, Kevin was 320 pounds and he dwarfed Hogan.
What do you think about the negative connotation that stuck with Kevin Nash about him, like just all about himself and all about money and not really giving back to the business?
Okay, I'm going to tell you something. The finger point of doom, that was not Kevin's idea. Robbie, you think Hogan wanted to work with Kevin for 10 minutes? No. It was Hogan's idea. And what are you going to say? No, the Hulk, he got creative control. Kevin's smart. He went to the line of less resistance. And people say Kevin never did anything. I remember in Charlotte, when they all gave up in the middle of the ring, Kevin, Scott, and six with Tully, Arn, and Rick. They put guys over. Kevin put Rey Mysterio over. You know, guys get this attitude thing that someone says, well, he's a prick, he's a prick, he's a prick. I found out something, somebody told me it was really funny about Kevin. He has a price that he goes for. And so I said, well, I was trying to, you know, play a friend card to get him out to L.A. And he says, that's what he charges his mother. So it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I mean? So Kevin is about the money, but Kevin looks now better than he ever did. Kevin was a credit to the business. I remember when Kevin and I were tag team partners, they gave him to me when he was real young. I said, you want to get over it? Get the baby faces to hate you. We were partners and we beat up some guys and threw them in. They came in, what's going on? What's going on? And that night we were riding home. I said, Kevin, you got over tonight. He goes, just remember that. And it was a work with Kevin and Scott. It was good cop, bad cop. Right. I knew it. You know what I mean?
Right.
First thing would be, Scott would come in and say, oh, Big Grumpy's grumpy tonight. Oh, and everybody, oh. Except I've seen it. You know, it's like I said, Leave It to Beaver, well, Whitey steals the dog.
Yes.
I've seen this 37 episodes, right? And Kevin would come in, fuck this, kick a chair. Everybody jump around and sit there. You know, and then after he got his way, him and I would have our moment. I said, fuck, brother, when you fucking get the Academy Award, please mention my name. And I'd like to thank Kevin Sullivan.
Was he as out of control as as we hear about nowadays?
He's the most controlled guy I ever met.
Right.
Alcohol, drugs, whatever your vice was, Kevin took it to this level where everybody took it to that level.
Right.
He's one of the most controlled guys I've ever met. And I said, I enjoy just talking to Kevin because we can talk about going to the Louvre, you know.
What about Scott Hall? Was he just as easy to talk to?
Scott had a problem. I mean, I'm not going to talk it out of school. I knew before it became public.
Sure.
I was there when he killed the guy.
Right.
I think Scott suffers traumatic stress syndrome. And
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, hey, killing a guy, blowing his head off. And the fight was about Scott's ex-wife.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you lay your head down at night knowing you took a human life? And whether it was, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm an asshole to say this. I might have done that when I was younger, like Scott did, but to get yourself in that position that you could actually get into that position.
Right.
But as I've mellowed, I did some crazy shit too when I was younger.
I'm sure.
I mean, I look back and I say, whoa, how lucky was I? But I'm glad to hear that Scott's doing well, because basically, Scott had a hard life. He was, Army brat or Air Force brat. His dad was an alcoholic, beat him, abuse. I mean, we were talking, I've been reading about the brain, and my sister-in-law is a psychiatrist, and we talk about the formative years to 7 years old. Like the Catholic Church says, if I have your child till he's 7, it doesn't matter if he never goes to church again, he's a Catholic, you know what I mean? Brainwashing and different things. So Scott, I think, had a harder life than Kevin, even though Kevin's dad died very young, which is tough. But Kevin had college background. He had a military background, which people don't know. To go to college in a military background, you have to fit in.
And have discipline.
And discipline, exactly, to me, exactly. And Kevin did a great job of having discipline. Right. I mean, he would go to the gym no matter how many beers he drank, you know?
Right, that's interesting. And your relationship with Hogan was always the same, always tepid?
Yeah, at first, when he came and got me to do this, it was like, brother, whatever you want. And then it was, that doesn't work for me, brother. You know what I mean? It was like, there were young guys that I wanted him to give a rub on, even in a tag team. Brother, don't you think, I'll give you an example. He would say to me, brother, don't you think that I should be both of them at once? He agreed because Flair had pounded the piss out of him.
That was Flair and Anderson, right?
Yeah, you remember?
I do, when they were hitting him with the shoe.
And then the other one where Arn beat Hogan on a counter. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
I came back the following week, me and Arn, and he beat both of us.
Yes.
Because I agreed to it. I had nothing to do with the Horsemen. I'm wrestling against them, right? The Dungeon of Doom.
That was also around the time when the WWF finally acknowledged the WCW, and they were actually making fun of Hogan losing in the vignettes. I wonder if that had did that have something to do?
I'm sure it did to his ego, but here's the thing. He was so pissed off at whatever, doing it for Arn, and let Rick talk him into it, that he said, well, I'm going to throw you in the match too. I just wrestled him last week. Why am I?
So he wanted you in the match to prove a point.
Yeah, he put a point. You should have protected me.
That's remarkable.
You should have protected me. And I looked at him like, it's like one time I met Johnny Ace in a hotel room, and they asked me what I thought, and I said, "How can you have Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio in a program for 3 weeks where they hate each other, and the 4th week they're tag team? Doesn't anybody watch this shit?" And what I'm getting back about them, we're talking about the WWE. They have the library. They have the answer. Go back and look at your goddamn thing. That's why I say, someone read a book or look at a movie. Go back and look at YouTube. Look when were you successful. I mean, god damn it, the shit's still. I'll give you the perfect example. I watched a documentary on Lady Gaga. I didn't know much about her except that she was a big star, right? Mm-hmm. Then I'm watching, I'm saying, oh, I see what's going on here. There's going to be a big tour, Madonna and Lady Gaga, because they're fighting one another. It's the Kevin Sullivan angle. And she said, good thing I got the gap in my tooth. Madonna would hate me more. And she said, if she thinks I'm such a piece of shit, why doesn't she push me against the wall and kiss me and tell me, Bunker Man, I'm going to kill you. Fuck. I mean, goddamn, it's the same shit, you know?
That's amazing. How did you convince Hogan to get to have his mustache shaved off?
He had to do it for a movie, and that never would have happened. Then Curtis said the great white Bengal tiger's whiskers were cut off. I mean, Curtis was the greatest stalker of all times, you know? So it was, I mean, he did it. I don't know why he did it for me either.
Did he bring it up, or did you?
He brought it up. I didn't understand, and I think Curtis might have had something.
Because that was pretty
in the background.
embarrassing.
Yeah, and I think Curtis might have had something to do with it because he really loved Curtis, and Curtis was beloved, as you guys probably know. Next to Terry Funk, he's been the most beloved guy I've ever seen in the wrestling business. Everybody stopped in Hawaii to pay their respects to the king. So I think Curtis Curtis was a big student of the game, and I think Curtis was like on a cloud overlooking my problems and saying, he deserves this one. Hulkster, you're going to shave it anyway. Let the devil do it, you know. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
Was the Dungeon of Doom created as a heel feeder system for Hogan?
I felt when I came to the Dungeon of Doom, except for Ming, and this is no disrespect to anybody else, I was coming out of the clown car at Barnum and Bailey's, okay? I knew what my end result was. I was going to have to turn him heel, right? Mm-hmm. But I knew all these guys he brought in didn't fit. You know, what's wrong with this picture?
Right.
They didn't fit. But I couldn't put them in a bunch of matches. So I said, let's make the Dungeon of Doom. How corny is that, right? And, I mean, that was the
I kind of
Temple
liked
Doom.
it,
Yeah.
but that was just me.
But a lot of people have liked it. As it's gotten, the years have gone by, a lot of
Sure.
people liked it. But I said, that way he can beat everybody
Right.
without hurting anybody.
So it was created
That was my idea. He can beat anybody. He can lay us all, 10 of us, on top of one another and beat us, and nobody gets hurt. I don't hurt Guerrero. I don't hurt Satin. I don't hurt Malenko. I don't hurt Jericho. I save these young guys. You know what I mean? It's
right.
like,
You can have them take on Kamala and Beefcake
Yeah,
and
yeah,
makeup
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's actually good thinking.
Well, thank you.
That's
But
good thinking.
it was
the
I was playing
Taskmaster
chess with
was
him.
the Taskmaster an offshoot of the Florida character?
No,
Obviously?
the Taskmaster was. I've been a comic book kid since I've been a kid, so that goes way back, right?
Me too.
Bizarro.
Yeah, so
Okay,
evil
Bizarro.
Superman.
Yeah, I was Bizarro.
The Bizarro Florida character.
Yeah,
Right,
I was Bizarro. The reverse colors, you know,
Right.
yellow and red rather than red and yellow.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I thought I was going to end Hulkamania because I was Hulkamania. So I mean, it was pretty cartoonish, but in the end, it paid off for the biggest turn of all times.
Well, and it also helped introduce the Giant. Talk a little bit about Paul Waite.
Here's the thing. You can have a talented guy and you can teach him wrestling, but you can't teach anybody to be 7'1".
Absolutely.
He had so much going for him. You know what I mean? He had so much going for him. And I didn't like what he did, Hogan, about Andre's son. I didn't like that because
Yeah, I was going to
Andre
ask you
was a
about
dear
that. Whose
friend.
idea was that?
That was Hogan's. Andre, the only thing I have in my house, wrestling related, I'll show you later, is a picture of Andre holding me and my brother in the palm of his hand outside of a friend's restaurant. Andre was a dear friend of mine. I didn't like that he was saying he was Andre's son, but this kid had something and he fit. You know, timing is everything in the wrestling business. And I've heard a lot of people talk about Dusty, Superstar, Terry. They talk about what made Eddie Graham so good was timing. He was impeccable with his timing. And I think...
Was he really a used car salesman?
Who? Paul?
Yeah. Is that where they found him? I heard
No,
that story.
I think the guy that was his manager was.
Right. I heard that story somewhere. So he's brought in, and how was he discovered?
He was discovered, this is crazy, he was discovered actually at a basketball game that Hogan was paid to go to, and he cut a Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage promo.
So it was just by chance and circumstance.
Yeah.
So Hogan immediately wanted to work with him.
Right.
And the Dungeon of Doom was cultivated to get him over? Was that?
No, I think the Dungeon of Doom, as you remember, I used to say it's written in stone, it's written in stone.
Where was that cave? Was that a real cave?
Yeah. On the Isle of Elba, it was where they put Napoleon. Hogan owned that little studio, And we did that in a week of like 6 a.m. morning calls. And Paul, think about this. You're not in the wrestling business, and all of a sudden, 3 months later, you're wrestling against Hulk Hogan.
And winning the world title soon thereafter.
Yeah.
Could he comprehend that?
No, nobody can at that age.
Right.
You know, I look back and, you know, you look back at Hollywood and the Hollywood stars that fizzled out, right? And you say to yourself, you know who if I'm saying the right name, Manoia, the kid that's playing Aquaman.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
You know, he's a handsome, he's half Hawaiian, part Hawaiian, Irish, German. He looks like, sort of like The Rock, but he's got a beard. He's 320 pounds. And he lives way out of Hollywood with Lisa Bonet, and they don't have a TV. They don't even have a cell phone. And someone asked him why. He said, because I was 24 when I was in this business. And out of 22 of my friends, I was the only guy that didn't get in trouble. So I think, when you're 24 or 19 or 25 or 30, you think the world is your oyster, nothing's going to change. Well, you know, in Peter Pan, the crocodile, right? Or that bit Captain Hook's hand off. That's the subliminal message. It's the clock that's chasing Captain Hook, not the crocodile.
Right.
Time's chasing us all.
Sure.
And as we mature, we don't, you know, I'm not going to get into spiritual shit, but, you know, put away childish things, you know what I mean? But, you know, at a while, at some time in your life, if you have a fucking problem or a demon chasing you, got to say, well, it's me or the demon, and I hope I can beat this thing. And I see that some of these kids, now I think they have people talking to them, like, save your money and do this and do that, invest in 401k, maybe buy some real estate. Brother, if you come from nothing, you got a bunch of money, it's hard to realize it's going to end when you're 24.
I understand. Time is the fire in which we burn.
Absolutely.
So, going into Halloween Havoc, my personal favorite pay-per-view of all time, who came up with the idea of the giant falling off the top of Cobo Hall?
Hogan.
that was a Hogan deal, huh?
Hey, let me. I shouldn't say this. My wife is going to be pissed.
She's not watching.
Okay, I'm gonna fucking squeal on myself. I was so upset. I was so fucking upset about it when they told me what he wanted to do. I got to Detroit, and I took something. I passed the fuck out. And I woke up, and I drove to when they're doing it, and I had it in my head, you can stop them, you can stop them, you can stop them. I get there, and it was like one of those things. Stop! And when he was going off the roof, you know what I mean? I was 2 minutes late, and I'm saying to myself, whoa, here I am. I have the best. I had are you a baseball fan, Timmy?
Yes.
I had the 27 Yankees, okay? I get Malenko and Guerrero on the first match. I got Rey Mysterio Psychosis. I got a bunch of guys that are drawing money, busting their ass off, and Hogan comes up with, he's going to push a giant off the roof. And I said to him, what are we going to say? Fee, fi, fo, fum next. It was like, whoa, I was into it so much. Here's the thing. Before he came, we were beating him, okay? I mean, we beat Vince out of the box. He never got back until Cactus jumped off the roof.
Right.
And everybody said, oh, Cactus just jumped off the roof. I went to Tony. I said, who the fuck told you to say that? He said, Eric. I said, well, everybody just tuned on. At the time, Mick was beloved too.
Right.
I said, you can't do that. It was like...
You meant Cactus won the belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I took a fucking hit of mescaline, I'm going to have a good night, but I got a guy over here putting on a fucking dildo mask, and he's telling me it ain't a dildo mask. I'm saying, what the fuck is wrong with you? This is a beautiful fucking portrait that this guy's painting, and you want to run around and beat trees? You know what I'm saying? It was completely off to what the fucking program was. And that's why I say about National Hall, they could have buried him. They could have brought that shit up if they wanted to, you know what I mean?
Did anyone else feel that way besides you?
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone?
Jimmy Hart didn't. You know, he said, baby, it's just wrestling. I was the only one that would say, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, this is wrong. Oh, you don't know. This is how I got over in New York. I'm saying, oh, it's
Were
been 10
the
years.
trucks his idea as well? The monster.
The monsters, yeah. I mean, he was trying to get, and rightfully so, I understand. He was good to me too. I don't want to knock him that bad. He was good to me too. Outside of the wrestling business, he treated me great. But he had to get, everything had to be monetized. He had to get a dime. You know what I mean? Everything he had to get money on. I mean, they signed a ridiculous contract with him. I don't know if this is the correct figure, but I think it was anything over 1-2 on the pay-per-view, he got 50% of.
Right.
He got, I think it was $100,000 on a Monday night, and $35 on a Thursday. And I left him off for Thursday, and he came to me and said, brother, why are you leaving me off? I can do an interview. Sure. $35,000 for an interview. And that's 20 years ago, right?
Right. That's remarkable. That's so fascinating. So the Giant comes back. Whose idea is the Yeti?
I kind of would like to take that as my idea because the guy, let me tell you a story about him that I don't think anybody knows. Robbie, do you know that Kevin Nash paid him for Big Sexy?
I did not know that.
Yeah, he owned the Big Sexy logo.
Who did?
The Yeti.
The Yeti owned Big Sexy?
Yeah. Before
Remarkable.
he was a kid in the school, he put down Big Sexy, he trademarked it and registered. Kevin Nash paid him a lot of money
So the
for that.
Yeti is the real Big Sexy.
Yeah, and I think he still is.
Unbelievable.
Well, you remember when he was humping the guy?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
It
that's
was-
Big Sexy.
The double standing bear hug.
That was some, I'd like to take the credit, but they got so far off. Here's the thing I think that happens to wrestling. When you're comfortable, to be a successful draw, this is my opinion, you got to get out of your comfort zone. I think that's why The Rock is such a big star. Remember when he did the gay guy, the gay black guy?
Yep.
Get Shorty? Was
Yeah.
that it?
No. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'll take any, Baywatch, everybody shit on that, but it drew a lot of money. He's not afraid to get out of his character. Hogan was afraid to even get his toe close to the line,
Yeah.
So, okay, if the Shack works, this kid's... See, Hogan's deal where he hated the guys underneath they were 5'9", 5'10". He's 6'6" at the time.
This is his mentality.
Yeah, he has to beat a Yeti. First time probably he ever heard of a Yeti, you know what I mean? And he decided to wrap the guy up, but he was a big guy. I mean, we had guys, I was looking at him sometimes at the Dungeon of Doom, that I love John Tenta. John Tenta was a wonderful human being. John Tenta was a legitimate tough guy. John Tenta should have been in a different thing, not the Shock. You know what I mean?
I mean, what came next for him was very odd. Remember, he shaved
Yeah,
half his head.
yeah.
I'm not a shark. I'm
Yeah.
a human.
Yeah, and I think that was because of the Brutus thing. Remember the yes, no, yes,
Zodiac.
no. Yeah, come on. Yes, no, yes, no. I mean,
Whose idea was that?
Hogan's. Hogan, I got to give him credit for this. When he's loyal to the end. But I had kept my friends' jobs, okay, and I'll tell you who they were. I kept Bobby Eaton a job. when they didn't want to use Bobby Eaton. But he wasn't making a lot of money, okay? And he had a family. And would you say, both of you, that Bobby Eaton's one of the greatest performers of all time?
Sure.
100%.
Bob and Ming, I kept them jobs. Maybe it's because I finally booked them against each other and I wanted to see that match. You know, I'm kidding there. They were my friends. They're hard workers. They deserved it, but I didn't pay them $500,000. They didn't get paid. I didn't have anything to do with pay. They didn't get paid $500,000. They got paid below their standard, but I kept my friends that I could a job because, I'll give you another example. Virgil, I kept him a job. You know why?
Why?
I could call Virgil at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and say, Virgil, Buff Bagwell can't make the town. You need to make the town. When's the flight, Kevin? 3:30. Okay, I'll be there. He never missed. Never missed. Whether anybody whatever they think about Virgil, he's a hard-working man. He was there for me. Okay, maybe he didn't give you a 4-star match, but it was better than not having a match at all.
Right.
And
the interview that I did before you last week, I interviewed the Honky Tonk Man, and the Honky Tonk Man told an interesting story about Hogan. He said that Hogan's downfall, if he had a downfall, which just in the annals of being in the companies, was that unlike Flair, who kept a circle around him, Hogan resisted having a circle around him. He didn't want to keep the people close to him, like the beefcakes and what have you. He always needed to be on his own island. So when it came time, he never had backup. He never had people to stand around him because he created this aura about himself that he was for himself. Is there any truth to that?
I never heard that before, but Wayne hit it right on the head. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll tell you a funny story. I've never told this. You know, when I left the wrestling business, I got into different businesses and I built a gym, bought property, blah, blah, blah. Taz called me one time and says, Hulk wants you to give him a call. I said, why? He said, I think he wants you to come in. This is in TNA. So I wrote some things down. I watched them for the first time, wrote some things down. He called me and he said, hey, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I looked at the show and this is what's wrong. He flipped because I didn't put him first. I went from the first match to his shit. It was like, whoa, you're trying to straighten this whole thing out and you're not really worried about me? And at that point, I really wasn't because he's Hulk Hogan. I don't think that he has a lot of self-confidence now. And I think that came when, you know, when we brought him back from Thunder in Paradise?
Yes.
Look at him when he came back from Thunder in Paradise from WrestleMania 3. He was a shell of himself. He was bent over when he was doing his interviews. It was only when he got with Nash and Hall, and they stepped back to let him, they propped him up. They really did.
So you credit the resurgence of Hogan's confidence to Hall and Nash.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the name Chris Benoit with you sitting here. I think a lot of people would like to hear a conversation about him. So talk a little bit about your first encounter with him and what you saw in him. And,
It was the best match I ever had in my life was with Chris Benoit.
the Falls Count Anywhere.
Yeah, in Baltimore.
That's
People
still
talk about it.
that still stands the test of time as one of the greats.
Yeah, and he was so intense that I have no ill will to Chris because I wasn't with her for 8 months.
Right.
Okay. If anybody told me it was going to be him because he had just had a child, second child, I never thought what was going to happen would happen. And I still don't, nobody knows what happened. Those 3 people are gone.
Right.
I just know that I know her mother very well, and I don't think her mother and father have had a night's sleep. Neither did the Benoit family have a night's sleep.
Right.
He was a student of the game. he might have been too hard on himself. I've heard other people talk. I heard Jericho, and I heard Bulldog's kid talk. That one time he screwed up a thing and he did 50 squats. He's always chewing on that thing. Nobody ever saw Chris Benoit dress. He was an intense individual. He went to Japan when he first started. Now, I know what it used to be like there, where they abused you. I never had a problem with Chris until the very end, when I put the belt on him. Somehow they thought I was going to. He thought I was going to screw him, putting the world title on him.
How
And
so?
I don't know. But do you know how hard it was? I brought Sid Vicious in the room, that's 6'9", and I said to him, "You're going to lose to Chris Benoit tonight?" And he said, "I'm losing to a midget." I said,
Those are his exact words?
yeah. I said, "Listen, the kid deserves it. He's worked hard. I want to put the belt on him, and it's an olive branch from me."
Right.
Came out of the ring. I said, "Congratulations. I think you're going to be a great champion, but eventually I'm going to take the belt off you with Nash. I think that will draw a lot of money." And then they were gone. It was a hard thing for me when they left because they were so talented.
Right.
I was stripped of an infield. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I had an all-star first baseman, an all-star second baseman, an all-star shortstop, an all-star third baseman. How am I going to replace them? That hurt business. And for me, I've always been able to separate personal and business. Like I said, my friends that I kept a job, they could work. Where Rick and Hogan sometimes kept friends that couldn't work. These guys went on to bigger and better things. If they had stayed with WCW, I don't think we'd be talking about the WWE today.
So you think they would have carried that much influence where they would still be in business with those guys?
Yeah, maybe not today, but through the 40s.
Longer.
Yeah, a lot
Right.
longer, at least 15 years longer.
Did anybody see anything? I mean, I'm sure it's hindsight. I mean, you can't even imagine. But did anybody ever get a sense of Chris Benoit? You said like no one saw him change, and he did things like you're reading a book about the human mind, and
yeah.
I've read a couple myself. So did anybody pick up on it, like knowing the culture of the business and being around wrestlers your whole life? Did you ever get a vibe that something was, I don't want to say off because that doesn't sound like what I'm trying to say, that he just was like sort of not?
No, I never got that from him. I mean, I never hung around with Chris because of our angle. Everybody was shocked when it happened.
What was your first reaction? I mean, of course, like shock, but
Teddy Long called me, and he said, "You know what happened?" I said, "Was it a gas leak?" That was my first.
Right, it's natural to think that.
I couldn't believe what happened. I mean, something snapped somewhere, and I don't want to talk ill about the dead.
Right.
We don't know, you know, supposedly brain damage.
Concussions, I've heard, but that's hard to swallow sometimes.
Something happened between him and her, and who knows what happened.
Right.
And I know it's like I said about Brian Pillman. Not only did we lose a great performer with Brian Pillman, but we lost one of the greatest bookers that would have been.
Right.
We would never talk about the Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes feud. We'd only be talking about Austin Pillman feud. And Benoit could have fit in there perfectly. I just don't know what happened. I don't think anybody's ever going to know.
Do you think the WWE is justified in what they did to his legacy by blackballing him and erasing him from all their lineage?
Personally, no, but business-wise, I understand why they did it.
Right.
Because they have people that buy stock.
Yeah.
He was one of the greatest performers of all times, and I guess now they're starting to show some of his stuff on TV.
A little bit.
I mean, how do you not? I mean, even I watch the NFL films and they still show OJ. How do you not show Chris Benoit?
Right. So, I mean, I think I don't think you can rewrite history. So, as tragic and unspeakable as the act is, it's kind of hard to change history. I mean, you talk about world wars and Napoleon and Genghis Khan and all these people were monsters, but they're still talked about. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is because. You know, Genghis Khan, you know, he conquered more than Rome did in his
sure
day.
did.
He had 3/4 of the world. He
fathered more children than anybody in history.
1/10 of every person on this planet has Genghis Khan blood.
Absolutely.
And the other thing about him is when he conquered a place, they weren't subservient to them. His mother adopted every child from whether they were Mongols or they were Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Italians. They all were his family. And to just write Chris out of history, it's very hard for me to understand that. But I understand their business model is they can't have any scandals anymore.
Right.
Especially with her being in the cabinet now.
Right.
I mean, we're seeing all of a sudden every woman's coming out of the woodwork. Any woman that's gotten touched on a knee is claiming, right?
Yes, that's the new thing right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So could you imagine if this was brought up for them?
Right.
And I think that's why they
I
do
can
it.
understand it
Yeah.
in a way.
And politically, I understand it because they don't want it brought up, especially in the atmosphere of today's political world.
Right. How do you think Nancy should be remembered?
I think she should be remembered that she was one of the forerunners of the Divas.
Agreed.
She performed when she was with me. She was a great performer. When she was with Chris and Flair, she was a great performer. I think people that she's overlooked at how good she was. When she was with Simmons and Butch Reed, I broke the color barrier with the white woman and the black guys. I put her in there, and then I broke the color barrier with Jackie. I guess I'm the furthest thing from a racist that you can be. My best friend was Teddy Long, and I got a lot of shit from guys. I heard the word N a lot.
Yeah.
Why you hang around with an N. From some pretty heavy-duty guys.
But it wasn't Hogan, was it?
No, of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. I'm from West Tampa, baby. What are you doing hanging around? Oh, excuse me. But, you know.
Sorry.
Yeah, but she was a great performer.
Yes.
And I don't think people understand to this day. I can remember the first time I ever wrestled in the Orange Bowl. I had her on chains, and it was on the news that night. And the newscaster put it up on sports. And he said, I don't know what this is, but I like it. So, I mean, she was a forerunner of it. Yeah, here's a picture of us. I mean, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I did without her, too.
That's a lot coming from you. That's probably the best compliment you could have given her.
She was a special talent, too.
Did she take to the business right away?
Yeah. She understood. She was around a lot of smart guys too. Gary Hart, Humperdinck, Mike Graham, Curtis, Mark, Superstar, Blackjack. I mean, she was around the smartest guys of my era.
Right.
And they all accepted her, and they would help her. And there's a great one of her when I worked for Mario while I was working in Florida, where Curtis's head is all cut. You know that. We used to do lines of coke out of Curtis's scars, right? I didn't say that. Other guys did lines of coke out of Curtis's scars.
Yes.
But she had these long fake fingernails on, and the TV starts, and you see Curtis's head, and Curtis is going, with the eyes rolling, she's massaging his head, right? I mean, she knew how to subliminally send that message. And then when she went to ECW with Sandman, Robbie was there. I think that made Sandman. When she would go out, cigarette, light it, and give it to him.
Yep.
I mean, how sexual is that?
Right.
Right? The cigarette when everybody's in bed. You know what I mean? She just knew what to do. And you can't sometimes teach that. And I think it was because of the people that she was with told her, okay, take this, put that away. Keep that, put that away. Keep that. And I think she revived Flair's career too. When, he was a 60-minute man, and when he was doing this before, there wasn't a girl with him. And then all of a sudden, this gorgeous girl's with him. I think it really got Flair over again.
It definitely didn't hurt.
No.
Speaking of Flair, you brought up Flair. What are your thoughts on Flair? Flair just had a scare. He almost...
Yeah. I just hope he understands how severe he was, and that, time which, like I said, the crocodile's on our ass, right?
We spoke about Hogan and his ego and working with him and booking him. What was Flair like to pitch an angle to?
I'll tell you a funny story. The smartest guy in the wrestling business, they talk about Eddie Graham, Dory Funk Sr. There would be no WWE if there wasn't a Jim Barnett. Jim Barnett got all the syndicated programs across the country, because at that time, any program director in the country that looked at his Rolex watch thought about Jim Barnett, because Jim had given him the Rolex watch. And I can remember, and I had a great relationship with Jim. Sometimes it was a love-hate, but in the end, it was just admiration society. And I remember Jim coming in and crossing his legs, and he said, "Kevin, my boy, you're going to have a hard road with this. Flair wants anybody to beat Hogan if he can't. So you're going to hear he wants to beat Vader. You're going to hear he wants to beat Hogan himself. You're going to hear Arn's going to beat him." He said, "Oh, God, he may even ask Brian Pillman to beat him." And he said, "Don't fall for it." And he was right.
Wow. Interesting. What was the fallout from when the NWO mocked the Horsemen?
Poor Terry Taylor takes the heat on that. It was my idea. Because we had made this thing for Arn so spectacular. It was so good. It was heartwarming. You cried. I mean, this is the end of the guy's career. It was the voice of the Horseman. And then these pricks come out, and Nash with Arn's cooler, and Six crying. They were so bullshit, and I knew it got over because if it affected them,
right.
I knew it affected the fans. And I can remember Arn going up to Kevin with 2 beers in his hand and 2 in his pocket, saying, "You made me look like a drunk," to Kevin Nash. And I said, whoa, this really got to them. But everybody forgets, 2 weeks later to Charlotte, all Nash, Hall, and Six lay down for them in the middle of the ring, and they beat all 3 of them.
Right.
So there was, I always say, you can't be a knight in shining armor unless you slay dragons, not salamanders. They got their comeuppance eventually, but it sold out forever. I don't know if it sold out forever. And it's a kind of a strange business that we're in, that we know it's fake. I know that when I wrestled Blackjack Mulligan, who was 6'9", had fists like that. When he fell down for me, he wasn't falling down for a 5'8" guy.
Right.
Okay, I understood that. I think some guys that, and I get at this thing, I want a psychologist to study this. When you give your name up, and I never gave my name up, right, except for a short period. When you give your name up, you become a different person. So that different person, your wife calls you your work name, your friends call you your work name, nobody calls you your real name. So when you look in the mirror, you see whoever you are, or do you see the character that everybody talks about? I think those guys got so sensitive who they were. They were, you know what I mean? And they are. They are. They
Right.
still are. But the reality is, there's still Ric Flair, there's still J.J. Dillon, you know what I mean? There's still Ole Anderson, there's still Barry Windham's his real name, but those other aren't, that's not their names. And I think somehow when you portray a character for 20 years, it's like Brad Pitt never doing another movie but
Fight Club.
yeah, Fight Club. They
Right.
into that character so long that the character takes over their personality.
That's interesting. How come Kevin Sullivan, the performer, never made it to the WWE?
I think the first time when they bought everybody's contracts, they couldn't buy mine because I was a employee. And then I had a couple of chances, and
Did they ever come after you when you were in Florida?
no. Early they did, yes. Early they did, but Florida was running, and I had the highest guarantee of anybody by $50, just to make me feel good, like placate my ego.
Right.
When I got the call, I said, this is never going to go work nationwide. If Barnett maybe had called me and said, hey, smarten the hell up, you know, I would have went. But I'm saying, he can't beat Eddie, he can't beat Shires, he can't beat the Funks. Little did I know how powerful he was going to be.
Fascinating. So if you knew what they were going to turn into, would you have went?
You can't, one thing is, like Satchel Paige said, you can't look back, something may be gained on you. I never try to look back, I try to look forward, because we can all second guess everything we've done in life. There's a couple of mistakes I think I made big in my younger years where Vince Sr. wanted to send me to L.A. and he was going to pay me to go to L.A. and anything else I got was a bonus, but I decided to go back to Florida. When I got to Florida, I got booked by Mike, not by Eddie. I had been on top, and then I was gone. And then when I was in San Francisco, and Roop was getting ready to leave, Shires came to me and said, hey, we don't use the NWA champion here on the West Coast. We're going to make you the U.S. champion. You can do it. And I said, no, I'm going to go with Bob. But I try not to look back at my mistakes because, God, we all make a lot of them.
I'll piggybacking off that question. So do you ever consider, when you look back at your wrestling career, not your booking career, that does it matter to you about titles or championships or how you're viewed in history or things you've accomplished, be it even though it's booked and even though it's written? Does it matter to you how you're viewed in in the annals of wrestling history?
Well, I want the people to say he did his best. I was at a dinner last week. It was very nice. It was me and JJ, and people came up to me and said, hey, they knew the angles better than I did, and you were a big part of my life, and that makes me feel good. But if anybody believes they won a title, I saw Ming at a dinner, and I kept on looking at him and saying, oh, this is all horseshit. You know what I mean? One time, I was going to wrestle Ming in a match, and he said, what do you want to do for a finish, brother? I said, I got the best finish of all. He said, what is it? I said, I'm going to give up on the handshake.
Does the WWE Hall of Fame mean anything to you?
Yeah, it does, because I think you get recognized by your peers, but I understand too, it's their company, and they also want to do away with history. So I was maybe a burr for them for a short time, and I don't think they would want to recognize me, and rightfully so. That
Do you still think they harbor ill will towards you?
I know, because I actually talked to Vince about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And,
Can we call him up? No.
yeah, and I actually talked to him about 3 weeks ago, and he,
Pertaining to?
I got a doll deal, and I mentioned that jokingly. His assistant, tell Vince I got the greatest idea since WrestleMania. He called me out of the blue, and I said, I just want to thank you for what you've done for me. I do get some stuff for them, and maybe it's a way of them keeping me appeased, or I'm certainly grateful that they put out a bunch of dolls and a couple of things for me. So I understand where they're at. They don't want... I bet you in today's day and age, if you ask the fan, Robbie, I want to ask you this.
Sure.
Do you think any fans really realize that WCW beat them for 96 weeks in a row?
I think the fans from back then, but today's fans don't even know
Yeah,
anything about it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So as history marches on, it's like in history, there are guys that have been lost. They had statues put up and they're gone.
Sure.
Right? So I think in a footnote in history, they're never going to say that, but they may say he had a feud with Dusty, and that was it. But I hold no will against them, no ill will against them at all. And they're doing what they have to do because they are a corporate company. And they're the ones that are writing history. Remember, history is written by the winners.
Always. Are you more proud of your in-ring wrestling career or your career behind the scenes as a booker?
I think the booking part, because to be a good booker, in my head, you got to check your ego at the door. And my thing about the Horsemen, we wrestled the Horsemen quite a bit, okay, the Dungeon of Doom. We had a 4-5 one time in Chattanooga when the NWA first came in, and Nash always talks about this. The Horsemen beat us, and 2 of us were laying down, and they came and picked our bones. You know what I mean? We sacrificed ourselves for them. And I knew the Dungeon of Doom wasn't going to draw a lot of money. I knew Nash, Hall, and Hogan, hopefully, was going to be the big thing. And you got to look at things and say, okay, I got the great workers here. I got the great workers here. And then I got the showmen up here, and I got the giants up here. How do I make this thing work for everybody? Because I think there's a lot of pressure on bookers back then that you got to make sure these people are eating. It's family guys. And I think that I tried, I mean, I'm sure guys have said I didn't, but I tried to make sure everybody was treated equally to their ability. I tried not to hold any grudges if I didn't like this guy, but he's a great talent. I tried not to hold that against them. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. Dusty had a great ego.
I was going to ask you that. How would you compare yourself as a booker to Dusty?
Barry Windham, I've mentioned this about Ric Flair. Ric Flair would never have been 16 times world champion except for freak things. David Von Erich was going to take the belt. He died.
Right.
Barry was going to take the belt. He fell out with Dusty. Magnum was going to take the belt. He had that horrible wreck. Nikita was going to take the belt, but he kind of screwed up. So I don't think Rick would have had the run he had, except for unique circumstances that happened.
That's interesting. Do you think Flair, as you spoke earlier, do you think he became Ric Flair and lost touch with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, You know, Rick is Rick. I love him to death, but Ric Flair is Ric Flair. I mean, I've been with Rick for years. To walk into a joint, order 100 kamikazes, and he was drinking virgins. You know what I mean?
Right.
So everybody else would be shit-faced.
He would do that on purpose?
Yeah, he would drink it once in a while, but he wasn't drinking every drink. So Rick he bought into, he was a 60-minute man. He was the most important person on the face of the earth. And I don't think if he didn't buy into it, we'd still be talking about Rick.
I'm going to cherry pick your career as we see the finish line coming soon. Thoughts on the Varsity Club?
Probably the best gimmick I ever did.
Really?
Yeah. They don't get their due. I had three. I had Rotundo, Dr. Death, and Rick Steiner. I'll put those three against anybody, right? And then it was like, here's three guys in varsity jackets, and this is the late 80s. And then there's a guy with a black hood, and what's wrong with this picture? And this is when the trials and tribulations of athletes at college, drugs, women, but, well, there's the problem with the varsity club.
Right.
Yeah, you know?
The devil's in there.
Yeah, that's that. You know, he's leading them down the wrong path. These guys would be good guys, and it showed too. I went to Dusty one day and I said, "We got 2 weeks, and Steiner got a turn," because the people cheering him, booing me, Rotundo, and Rotundo doesn't get his due. I mean, he played off of Rick better than I played off of Rick. You know, shut up. You know what I mean? Mike Rotundo in that period was as on as anybody could be on, and Dr. Death was. But they were playing off of Rick, who was talking to a fly. I'll never forget this. The first time we turned Rick babyface, it was in the Boston Gardens. I was going to wrestle in the old Boston Gardens. And Marvin Hagler was on the first row. So, of course, the heel would usually go out first, right? But I got to the announcer and I said, "Rick, you're going out first." So Rick goes out, he's coming down the aisle, the whole building goes, "Ooh, ooh, ooh," you know?
Right.
And the announcer says, and making his way down the aisle from the home of the new NBA champions, the Detroit Pistons, boo! I come down the aisle. And here comes the boy from Boston, from the home of the greatest basketball franchise in the world, the Boston Celtics. I get in the ring and I can see smoke coming out of his ears. We jump start the match. He shoots me and gives me a close. My neck has never been right since. I fall out of the ring. You know, they always say I didn't take bumps. And this one, I took a bump. I fell on the floor, and I'm pulling myself up, and Marvin Hagler was looking right at me, face to face. I said, "Brother, I need some help." He said, "Brother, you're on your own tonight." and yeah, Rick, I always thought Rick handled right could have been the biggest babyface of all times.
You're starting, let's hypothetical. You're booking a promotion. You have one pick. You can either have Hulk Hogan in his prime or Ric Flair in his prime. Who do you pick to start your company?
In today's day or back then?
I would let's say 1995.
I think you got to go with Hogan.
What about now?
Now, Brock Lesnar.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you think if Hogan and Flair are in their prime in modern day now, do you think they would be as big stars as they were back then?
Rick would have been, because we've switched from the cartoon character, because you got to remember in the 80s, every woman had boobs this big,
right,
hair this big, the bodybuilders were huge. And I think Hogan would have been looked at as a, steroid freak or whatever they want to say.
Right.
Because if you look at a bodybuilder magazine now and a bodybuilder magazine when Hogan was coming up, two different bodies.
Right.
And Flair kind of fit in the middle of that. You know, he didn't look like he was gassed. He looked like an athlete. But going back to today, I personally like to see Brock work, and I do like to see Kurt Angle, and I hope he works more.
Yeah, I don't know if he can.
Yeah.
As far as like
Yeah.
health-wise, who's the greatest in-ring performer you've ever seen?
There's two. Let me rephrase that. If I was back in the day and I was a alien and I came to the wrestling matches the first time and every world champion came out, the guy I knew was the world champion was Bruno.
Right.
He carried himself. But the greatest in-ring performer I ever saw, it's a toss-up between Johnny Valentine, it was a different era, and Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens was a high spot, and Rick stole everything from him. But Johnny Valentine had a statement that he used to say, "You may not believe in wrestling, but they're going to believe in me." Took Johnny a long time to get over. But I want everybody out there that's watching this to YouTube Wahoo and Johnny Valentine and tell me it wasn't a shoot. I mean, the blood's flying out of their chest. And Johnny, I've talked to Greg about this. He liked pain. When you hit him, he had goosebumps. And one of the biggest things that ever happened to me in my life, I first went to Charlotte, and Johnny was Beat the Champ and had silver dollars, right? And every week there'd be another 100 silver dollars. So he came over to me and said, "You think you can carry me 10 minutes, kid?" I said, "How long's the match, sir?" He said, 10 minutes. What? He said, "Yeah, we're going to go through." When I went through with him, it was like I beat Thez, Flair, all of them. I mean, people were surrounding my car. "How did you do it? You're going to beat him. You're going to beat him." He knew how to get somebody over too. And and I was green as grass. I just listened to him. He missed his finish was the elbow, and he dropped an elbow on you, you know. And he had me roll 4 times, and he never took a bump. And I made a comeback on him, and he rocked and rocked. And just as he had perfect timing, and just as the bell rang, I gave him a shot, and he fell on his ass. It was like I knocked him out. The people came up in a small studio, and the bell rang, you know, and the announcer said, "Oh, if you had 2 more minutes." He was fabulous.
Kevin Sullivan, in his prime in 2017, could you get over?
Yeah, because I could talk.
Right.
I could talk the people in. I mean, my shtick was the same shtick. It was very easy. I mean, like I told you, I had great baby faces to work with. Dusty, Blackjack, Barry, Superstar, and Andre. And they all did the same thing for me. I go to the ring first. I'm 5'8". So I'm saying, how do I make my liability my strong suit? Before they got to the ring, I jumped them. I killed them.
Right.
Threw them into the ring. And especially with Andre, I would throw in the ring. So now I'm standing above Andre, right? I beat him up, throw him out of the ring again. I would throw him out of the ring again, and then I'd jump on him, beat the shit out of him. He'd hit me one time, throw me the ropes, but I'd be on my knees. So when he stepped over the ropes, I was 3 feet shorter. There was the pop. All he had to do was hit me a couple times, shoot me in the ropes, give me the big foot, and cover me. But Blackjack, if I nailed him one time, he was 6'9", he went down. Dusty was the same thing, Superstar. Those were the guys, and I said this the other night. I would have gotten over, but only to a certain degree. But Gordon Soley played my gimmick so straight. It was Abbott Costello. You know, he was Abbott, and he played it so clean. He never knocked it. He'd question what I was doing. Oh, he's into another thing. And then Gordon and I started playing off of one another. When I was saying I was in Samoa, and Gordon and I was at the Village, and I saw Princess Ananka. She told me to tell you hello. And there's a lot of young children out there called Soli. Have you been to Samoa? Let's not talk about that now, Kevin. Let's get on to your match. I mean, I was saying, everybody has something to hide.
Right.
And Gordon played it so well. Gordon, you know, as great as Jim Ross is, he's the second best announcer of all times. Gordon was the best.
Do you ever, when you see characters that sort of came to life from Kevin Sullivan,
Yeah.
let's say Undertaker and even a Bray Wyatt,
Yeah.
do you do you feel good about that?
Yes.
Because you can definitely see the Kevin Sullivan influence.
Well, Barry Wyatt was a young boy coming to watching Florida Championship Wrestling with his father and mother.
Right.
So I hope that maybe it was an influence, but he's doing it much better than I can. And The Undertaker has drawn more money in the wrestling business for the longest time than anybody. And I think he didn't take it from me, he took more of it from Mark.
Right.
So I think Mark and I did influence some of the crazier guys that drew money. And that's the key, that drew money.
Do you consider yourself a legend?
No.
Why?
I think legends like, you know the movie Liberty Valance?
Sure.
Remember at the end? Mm-hmm. You either tell the truth or you tell a legend, but when the legend's bigger than the truth, you tell a legend. Maybe it's a legend, but I don't think so. I think the truth is, I was a guy that went to his work and a blue-collar kid that understood that I was going to a job, and maybe that's why I don't have stuff on my wall that I can look back at and say, well, I did that. Well, it was a work. You know what I mean? So I understood my position, I think. And this isn't knocking anybody that has all that, because they did so much more than I did in the wrestling business. So, no, I don't think I'm a legend. I'm lucky to be here, you know?
Well, you may not consider yourself a legend, but I think the fans consider you a legend.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, some people do say that to me, and I appreciate it, but I think that when they think about me being a legend, they think about me when the grass was greener, the beer was colder, the girls were better looking, and that was the best time of their era,
Right.
their life. So, yeah, it somewhat gives me I'm happy that they think that way, but I don't think when I got to cut the grass on a Saturday and I get told I got to cut the grass, I realize I'm not a legend.
Well, I think anybody who may even be a legend still has to answer to the little lady.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Kevin, thanks so much for being here. This was an incredible experience.
It was my pleasure.
It was incredible talking to you.
You were a great interviewer.
Thank you so much.
You.
Coming from you, that's a true honor and the best compliment I think I've ever gotten. Thank you for joining us here on Reflections with the legendary Kevin Sullivan. There'll never be another one, I'll tell you that. Thanks, guys.